Welcome everybody to my Halloween show. Tonight I'm going to do different things and show you my representation of Halloween. I'm going to have a couple stories, a couple of poems, and I'm going to talk about my favorite Halloween things. The first thing I'm going to do is a poem. And the poem is named The Night. It's the night when ghosts and ghouls are out and about. It's the night where vampires and witches dance in the moonlight. Whether you're out trick-or-treating, or going to a haunted house, or going on a spooky hayride, or staying inside and watching your favorite horror movies, Halloween is the time of year to let your creepy out. Get dressed up and have a good time. But please be careful, because amidst us who are dressed up, there's some real ghosts and goblins and vampires and witches, and they may not like it so well. So have fun this evening. Alright, and the next thing I'm gonna do, that was tonight. That's the first poem for tonight. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do some of the tops that I have for this holiday. Like my top favorite songs, top favorite movies. I have my top favorite songs, my top favorite horror movies, movies to watch period during Halloween, and my top favorite kid movies to watch during Halloween, and my top favorite stories. I'm going to start with my favorite songs. The songs that really get me in the mood for Halloween. Number 5 would be Time Warp from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I love watching that movie this time of year, and I also love that song from that movie. So many songs, but that song really puts me in the mood for Halloween. Number 4 is This Is Halloween from Nightmare Before Christmas. Once again, another movie I love to watch this time of year. And just hearing that at the beginning of that movie, you just know that it's time for Halloween. Number 3, which is a classic, and everybody knows this one, which is Monster Mash. I love hearing that as a little girl, and I still listen to it today. I've had it as a ringtone before on my phone for Halloween. Not this year, but I've had it as a ringtone before. I love that song. Number 2 is I Put a Spell on You. I've listened to the old version of that song, but I think my favorite version of that song is this version from Hocus Pocus. Love that once more. And number 1 of my top favorite songs for Halloween, which would be Thriller by Michael Jackson. I love that song. Love it. I used to watch it as a little girl, try to do the dance moves. I'm sure everybody's tried to do the dance moves. And next, I'm going to do my favorite kind of adult movies. I'm not going to say horror movies exactly, but I'm going to say they are movies, period. And this is a top 6 for the favorite movies, which number 6 is The Conjuring. That movie scares the crap out of me, and I feel like that is ideal for Halloween, to get that scariness in. But it's something you cannot watch with your kids if you have kids. Not at all. Number 5 is Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I love watching Elvira growing up. Her TV shows where she's making fun of the cheesy horror movies and stuff like that. And I've watched this movie, Mistress of the Dark, and I've also watched House on Haunted Hills. But out of the two, the one I normally go to will be Mistress of the Dark. Number 4, the Paranormal Activity movies. I know a lot of people might be like, oh, I don't really care for those. But I personally love them, and I feel like they get you in that mood, especially if you're into like ghost sightings or haunted houses and things like that. And possessions. These are the type of movies that I feel like are ideal. And a new one just released not that long ago. I haven't seen it yet. Hopefully, I get to see it soon. Number 3, which is a classic horror movie, in my opinion, Puppet Master. I love watching this as a little kid, and I still watch it today as an adult. Love it. Number 2 is actually a new movie I saw the other day on my phone. It's called Tales of Halloween. It's called Tales of Halloween. Tales of Halloween has 10 different stories going on in one town on Halloween night. And it kind of brings you different versions of Halloween where it's scary or spooky or flat out crazy and creepy. This movie covers all bases for you. All of them. And I suggest look on Netflix, Hulu, wherever, and try to find this movie because it's awesome. And my number 1 movie I like to watch during Halloween, which there's so many movies I like to watch because I am quite a movie person. But my number 1 is Rocky Horror Picture Show. Once more, another movie I watched since a little kid, and I still love that movie today. Alright. The next one is the top kids movies. And this one is a top 5 list. This is the top 5 kids movies I will still watch today to get me in the mood for Halloween. Number 5 is Nightmare Before Christmas. Love that movie. Love it. Number 4 is Tower of Terror. If you've ever seen the ride at Disney, they actually have a movie that came out way back when. And I love that movie. Once more, I'm very big into ghosts and stuff like that, so I love it. Love that movie. Number 3 is the Twitches movies. I loved both movies for Twitches, which is the movie with the twin witches, if anyone doesn't know about it. It's another Disney movie. I should have made this the top Disney movies for Halloween, because my whole list is pretty much Disney movies. Number 2 is Hocus Pocus. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh my god, you put that number 2. But I love that movie. Love it. And it actually fought for number 1 compared to my other one. But I watched this one after I watched my number 1. Which my number 1 is the Halloween Town movies. There are 4 different ones, and I love those movies. Love them. But like I was saying, I will watch those every year with no problem. I will find some way to watch them, whether I'm looking on YouTube, trying to download them, buying them at store. One way or another, I'm watching those movies. And next and final for my top list, which will be the top stories. Yes, the next will be the top stories. And with the top stories, it'll be the top 4 stories. I have a lot of different stories I like watching I like to read during Halloween, or I like to hear during Halloween. And some stories actually, one is very new on the list, which is why it's number 4. So I'm going to go right into it. Number 4 is actually, because this year I just recently got into the creepypastas, which if you don't know, they're like the horror stories that you could find on the internet. And number 4 is Jeff the Killer. I don't want to go into details about any of the stories. I can't tell you who originally wrote this because I saw it on YouTube. Because now I actually watch a lot of creepypasta, the people who do the creepypastas on YouTube, and they retell them. But that is a very scary story to me, and I think it's crazy. Number 3, which would be Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I love that storybook. Love that chapter book. I used to read Stephen King all the time in high school, between him and Anne Rice and Edgar Allan Poe. Which brings on to my number 2, which is The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. I love that poem. I've loved a lot of different things about Edgar Allan Poe, but that is my favorite poem of all of his, is The Raven. And number 1 in my favorite Halloween stories that get me set up for Halloween, which is a classic, which is Sleepy Hollow. I love that story of the Headless Horseman. It terrifies me and genuinely makes me a little frightened sometimes about people and horses running around on Halloween. But anyways. Alright, and I'm gonna take a brief break, and when I come back, I'm gonna tell you one of the stories I'm gonna do for the evening. Alright, and I am back. And this story I'm going to tell you, this is kind of going off the top of my head because I've heard the story before, but I can't remember how it went all the way. I don't remember the name of it exactly, and I couldn't research it on time. But I'm going to try to tell you my version of the story. This story is about, there was a couple who just got married, and they were heading to their honeymoon spot on their wedding day. And they got there, were having a lovely time. And unfortunately that evening, the bed and breakfast that they were staying at got robbed. And they didn't realize it at first. They were just having a good time in their room when someone knocked on their door. And the man went to the door to answer. He thought it might have been room service or something because they ordered some wine. And the man was horrifically stabbed 7 times as his wife saw him bleed to death. The guy steps over his body without a care in the world and then butchers the wife 7 times as well, stabs her 7 times as well. It was so sad because they didn't even get buried next to each other or anything. And people used to say when they would drive by the bed and breakfast, they could still hear the couple screaming from years and years. Recently, they reopened the bed and breakfast. And sure enough, another couple came on their honeymoon night. And they were celebrating their wedding, trying to have a good time, and they were staying in the same room as the couple who was originally butchered to death. And they tried to go to sleep early when out of nowhere they hear a man screaming at the top of his lungs, screaming. Then a few minutes later they hear a female screaming as well. And they turn on their lights. No one's there. So you turn them back off. And then they hear it again. The screaming. And then they hear, don't stab me, stop, please, I love him. And then they turn on the lights again. No one's there. This time, they call room service to figure out if there's a couple arguing, what's going on. And that's when the lady in room service told them the story of what happened. They were so terrified that they asked to be moved, but they had nowhere else to go that evening. So then the couple start arguing about how it was a bad choice to come to the bed and breakfast. The man gets so upset he leaves the room, leaves his new wife in the room by herself. She's crying her eyes out, trying to figure out what to do. When she hears a knock at the door. She thinks at first it might have been her new husband, but she realizes he took his key. So she looks at the door and she sees this woman with her eyes full of tears banging at the door. So she lets her in with no problems at all. And they started talking, and the woman was crying because she lost her husband. She can't find her husband. She's trying to find her husband. She says she's a newlywed, and she recently just got married, and her husband and her got separated. She doesn't know what happened. So the other girl decided to help. And she was calling around asking, have they seen someone? They haven't been able to find them. They called the hospitals. They called everywhere that they would call. They even called the police to make sure there wasn't a missing they put in a missing persons report. And the girl just kept crying and crying as the other newlywed was covering her and trying to tell her it'll be all right. Her husband will come back. If she truly loves him, if they truly love each other, they will be together. And the other girl stops crying and looks at her and says, do you believe so? Do you believe with all your heart, if you truly love someone, you'll be with them regardless? And she said yes. And then she was telling her about what happened earlier with her and her husband, about how they argued, and unfortunately he left out. And that's why she's in the room alone. And then they kept talking, and then a few minutes later, and as they're talking, the husband's walking around outside, playing on his cell phone, trying to calm down and trying to see his wife's side of everything. Because he's trying to not go back in the room upset when he sees a man walking around lost and confused. And he asks him, what's wrong? Why do you look so upset? Why do you look so confused? And the man says he lost his wife. He was recently married, and him and his wife were separated. He can't find his wife. So the husband says, well, I'll take you up to my room, and maybe we can find your wife. So, as the two men are walking and talking in the hallway, and then the other man was saying, I just want to find her. She means the world to me. I just want to find her. And the husband said, if you truly love her, she will be back with you, and she'll come back to you. And as he opens the door to his room, he feels a cold shiver down his spine. And then he opens the door, and the man stops what he's saying in the middle of his conversation and says, honey, that's you? And she looks at him with tear-soaked eyes and says, yes, darling, I've been waiting for you for so long. And they embrace each other and hug. And they look at the newlyweds and say thank you very much as they disappear. I know that story. I know it's a different versions of that story, but I do like that story too. I feel like that's a nice story for this time of the year. Alright, and I'm gonna take another break, and then I'm gonna tell you a story that I made, and then another poem. Alright.